People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. That is a quote by Maya Angelou. Welcome to Trina Talk. This is the podcast where guests share their stories of pursuing their passions, living a fulfilled life, and empowering others. Each week, I talk with inspiring leaders, business owners, and people with amazing stories from around the world in unscripted conversations as they share their successes and failures. This podcast is all about empowering you to keep striving in your personal and professional life. I am your host, Trina L. Martin. Hello, welcome to episode 156. The topic of this week's episode is Emotionally Intelligent Leaders. My guest this week is Irvine Nugent. Dr. Irvine Nugent helps people harness the power of their emotions so they can have deeper connections, make better decisions, and increase their influence. He is an internationally recognized trainer and top-rated keynote speaker and is one of the few worldwide certified facial action coding system coders who are experts in reading facial emotions. A gifted storyteller, his programs are infused with passion, dynamicism, and of course, his natural Irish humor. He is the author of Leadership Lessons from the Pub. Hello, Irvine. Welcome to Trina Talk.
Trina, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm excited to speak with you. As we were talking before the show began, you have some unique skills, and I don't know, maybe you'll help me with some of those while we're talking. But usually how I like to start off the show is I always ask my guests who you are, to tell the listeners who you are and exactly how you came to be the Irvine that you are today.
Oh, great question. So I'm Irvine Nugent. I live just outside of Washington, D.C. However, my story begins in Northern Ireland. That's where I was born and I grew up. I am classically known as a child of the Troubles. My generation got its own name because I grew up in, many people may be familiar in the violence that happened there in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it was a background to really growing up, and it impacted me personally with my family, but also I think just psychologically. And, you know, as I look back at my life until this point, I think in many ways I have attempted to respond to that. It impacted me. And you know, part of it was growing up in a divided society. And it got me curious about why do people do what they do? And why does communication break down? And today, I have a lot of fun. I work in the area of emotional intelligence, and I work in organizations and with leaders, really helping them understand their emotional life and become more emotionally intelligent so that they can really engage in the workplace and understand themselves and understand the people they work for better and create more human workspaces. And I do that in training and speaking and in the writing that I do.
Wow. So already my brain is going 1,000 miles a minute because I'm thinking of things that I'm like, ooh, I want to ask this. So I know what emotional intelligence is, but educate me and tell the listeners exactly when you say you help people with, tapping into their emotional intelligence, or what, you know, tell us exactly what that means.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I mean, I think that I help people do 4 different things in 4 different areas of emotional intelligence. I think, first of all, and the foundation of it all is in self-awareness. So if we are going to, in some way, manage our emotional life, we have to be aware of what's happening. So do we understand what emotions we're having? Do we understand our triggers and when we're emotionally triggered and some of the impulses and actions and behaviors that happen from that? Then knowing that, do we have some tools that help us to manage our emotions in the moment so that we are choosing avenues that are productive and help us go where we need to? Then the third area is, do I understand other people's emotions? When I walk into a room, can I read that room? Am I empathetic? Can I connect with other people? And then finally, in any conversation, can I manage that conversation to an outcome that is what I want and is beneficial to all the parties concerned?
Those are some very vital skills to have. And I'm just going through as you were naming them off, like I can feel a room. I can walk into a room and I can feel it. And I'm a pretty good discerner of people. So I think that's one of the emotional intelligence skills that I have. So you say, do you work with just individuals? Do you work with corporations? You work with everyone? How does one come or seek you out, and do you go to help them?
Yeah, so I work with a variety. I tend to work more often than not with individual leaders and organizations. I'm normally called in there either in a coaching engagement or in a training engagement. And what I tend to do there is I tend to do some specialized training around developing that emotional intelligence skill, and then also very popular as well as emotional presence, kind of an executive presence. And are we being consistent in the presence that we want to have? And then really helping individuals within the organization create what I like to say more human spaces. So are they aware of their own emotional life and how that can create barriers? And are they aware of other people? And very often, we really live in in a society that celebrates from people that are intelligent from the neck up. I like to say in the head. And, so often what makes leadership successful is that emotional connection we have with people. Because, if you have no followers and you can't bring people, then that's at the heart of all leadership, no matter where you're leading, either at home or in an organization. And so these are skills, that I think we assume people can learn along the way, but there's no master map. There's no there's no, here's how you do it. And I think some people are better than others in picking these skills up.
It's so funny you say that, because I do leadership coaching, and I was just talking to someone today, and I was saying how most people in positions of leadership don't understand that people don't leave jobs. They leave their manager. And it's because of exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely.
How they treat people. So tell us how you see things showing up when you're called in to work with people, and how the things that you are aware of and notice that you make them aware of, and how you go about helping them correct that.
So I think what I like to say is, when you go into organizations and there is a lot of anxiety present in an organization, and there's a lot of tension around a leader, some of the behaviors that you begin to notice is that there is a lack of curiosity, that there is discussions are shut down, that there's a failure to listen to all the voices because it can be very defensiveness. You can get into that. There is what I like to say is that people shut their doors and they don't interact at all. There's a lack of humor. Humor is a great emotional intelligence skills, and very often leaders that are triggered and anxious, they just don't have the skill. Whereas in a tense situation, someone can go in and just crack a joke about a situation, not about a person, but about a situation, and it just relieves the stress. And then the other thing as well is conflict. Very often with these leaders, they don't deal with conflict well, and conflict becomes personal and it becomes attacking. So these are the behaviors I see. What I find is that more often the leaders are unaware. They're unaware that they're having this intense reaction. Leadership is a powerful role. Mm-hmm. And I think the leaders don't recognize that they have power to set the tone. And it's a power that can be used really to benefit and to build. And so part of that is the work that I do is really building a foundation of awareness. And the other thing they don't do well is they don't read people around them. Mm. So, very often we spend so much time focusing on the words that people use, and we miss the nonverbals happening around us. So, are people engaged? Are they disengaged with their body language? Are they becoming defensive? Are they covering themselves up? All of this is vital data that can help the communication process.
Oh, I love it. I love it because this is kind of like my jam right here, leadership and helping people become leaders, because I have been on the receiving end of some of these people that you talk about. I don't even say leaders, because being an officer in the military, there's a distinct difference between a leader and just someone who's a manager or a supervisor. And I always say the few leaders that I have considered as good are the ones, like you said, that have the emotional intelligence, who are aware of their people, who are conscious and care and have empathy. And then the ones that I totally have no clue, or they're so high up on their horse, are the ones that I found that were the worst and that people didn't like, and that demotivated the team. The morale was low. So it's very interesting. And what are you seeing, especially in this day and age where we all have been affected in different ways and it's playing out in our lives in different ways? Do you find that these leaders that need help with emotional intelligence are driving their people away? Because I think with COVID and how people have learned to do, pivot, that's the buzzword now, to pivot and do things. I think a lot of people have decided that, why should I go back to work and take the crap that I was taking at work when I have all these other skills and I can do this myself? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think we're beginning to kind of scratch the surface of what's happening. So first of all, I just like to say that as human beings, we are built to survive. And when we feel threatened, we'll go into a defensive flight or fight mode. And we have just been in an extended 18 months, and we continue to be, of a triggered moment where we are in fight or flight. We are literally in survival mode. And for some of us who to go outside is a decision and a fear around that. Now that impacts how we function. We don't function at our optimal. So you've got a situation of leaders trying to lead in this, and they're being triggered as well. And so what I found during this is that I think some leaders became very more defensive. I think because they struggled because people were working virtually. And so if they have a lack of confidence in people, then I think it led to some micromanaging going on and a lack of trust. So if you don't have a trust of your team, then in a virtual setting, oh boy, then that just leads to greater behaviors. And then one thing I want to bring up, which is really curious, what you brought up at the end, which I think is true too. People have gone into working in a different way at home. Now for some people that was very stressful and they're only too happy to get back. But for others, it was different and their time was different and they got to choose different things. And I feel that, yes, people want to go back to work. But what I'm finding in my coaching is that people are also saying, but I don't want to go back to the way it was. It can't be the same, because just the same old way it was before, I've discovered something new. And I think there is this, this tension about how do I carry forth some of the great things that happened during this pandemic in the way that I was with my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the managers, supervisors, however you want to classify them, the ones that weren't that great before the pandemic, I think that they, like you said, they really struggled with the pandemic. And even now, it's just amazing how many people are in positions of leadership and they really don't have the skills. I mean, and they don't, a lot of them don't understand that leadership is not just being in a position, giving orders and all of that. It's like you're saying, having that emotional intelligence, because, when you treat people right and you can communicate and know them, you get people who want to be productive for you.
Yeah. And, And in fairness as well, we don't do a good job in training leaders as well. Very often what happens, at least and I don't know if you've seen this as well in organizations, normally what happens is, oh, we need a new leader. Well, who's been performing well? And so we take these subject matter experts who are really good at getting a specific role done, and then we promote them. And the problem is we don't put enough support around them. And then, of course, people struggle because, I think one of the greatest difficulties is moving from that manager role into a leadership role. Because, when you're a manager, you say, well, I did X, Y, and Z today. I got all this accomplished. And then as a leader, you think, what did I get done today? Oh, my God. I think about 3 fires. I don't know. And then the danger is, let me go back into my comfort level. And it's a micromanaging and it's a controlling, because at least I know I'm getting something done. And, sometimes leadership is being comfortable in making decisions when you only have 70% of the data. And it's at times it is not comfortable. And it takes a while to get used to.
Oh, yeah. And I believe I read Colin Powell's book and he said the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, being a leader, you have to make those decisions. You may not have all the data, but you still have to make that decision. And that's up to you. And whatever comes after it, that's for you as well. Wow. So tell me, how long does it take once you're called into a place and you start working with your clients? How long does it take for them to see what they need to change? And are they resistant or are they always open to that change?
So I think it's a great question. So I don't think there's an average you can go. I think what I look for in the beginning is there an openness? Unfortunately, I think coaching has, in some organizations, it's the dirty word. It's like, we need to fix this person, and so we'll get a coach for them. And very often it's such a terrible, when that's the culture, then there is a resistance. And I can understand, why would I want to coach? I don't have any problems, but when you have a supportive culture that, hey, part of leadership development is growing, and part of growth is having a coach who can help you. What a gift. So I find when there is an openness and a receptiveness, then I think that's the beginning. Now, in any coaching relationship, there'll come a point where there are things coming up and truths that are being said that are uncomfortable. And some people are more resistant than others to that. And it may take them a longer time. But I think with emotional intelligence, I like to get very practical. I like to give people tools. So I think, within 2 or 3 months, people should begin to see differences. And as long as they're putting the work in, then they should be picking up things both in their own self-awareness and examining some of their patterns of behavior, and then how they're managing the different relationships. And really, at the core of great coaching is bringing in real life situations. Hey, I had a conversation with Trina last Tuesday and this is what happened. I said, okay, well, let's explore that. And that's really where magic can happen.
So can you give us just a few of your tools, 1 or 2 that you actually use that are like your foundation of telling people, okay, these are the things that you need to work on?
Yeah. So one of the ones I'm a great believer in understanding our emotional triggers. And so we are creatures of habit, and we have behavioral patterns, and to understand those. So one of the tools, one of the works that I do is really finding people to really reflect on past behaviors, especially behaviors that they've been called out on, or behaviors they just find themselves in that they later regret, and really examine that. What is it? What is the trigger? What led to that? So say, for example, I was working with a client a few weeks ago. One of her triggers was that when someone spoke over her at a meeting, it shut her down. And that was it. And so they said, well, that's interesting. Does that happen? And so to explore that, and then what I like to do is get below the surface. Well, what is it about that? Why is that such a triggering moment? And then you can kind of explore, as well. It was actually, I can remember growing up at the dining room table, I was told never to speak, etc. So there's even like a deep pattern going on there. And then also just to exploring, what is it about that? What does it violates? And she said, well, it's just, there's a lack of respect. And when I don't have respect, I just shut down. I said, oh, interesting. And so then, well, then how do we deal with that? And then another tool that I like to use is visualization. So I like to use, so visualize yourself then in that meeting, someone speaking over you. What might be other ways that you could respond? And it's great to have some fun, you can kind of like talk about ridiculous things. I'd never do that. But then, what we arrived at was, well, I would just like to be very firm and to say to that person, you know what, I'm actually not finished. I need an extra minute. But there's a lack of confidence there. So in other words, let's begin to visualize that. And of course, with visualization, we know the power athletes use it, surgeons use it. And so to get very granular, to imagine yourself in the situation, to hear your voice saying that, to feel yourself doing that, and to kind of really visualize that and then take it into the meeting. Will it work perfectly the first time? No, but it's this attempt to really change behavior and to understand that. So that's kind of a little flavor of one of the core areas of kind of changing some behaviors and some reactive behaviors that we might have.
And I know you mentioned you work and you start off helping people like evaluate themselves, to know themselves. That way they can learn what these triggers are and things like that. How does one come to do that? Because evaluating yourself is very confronting, right? It's something that is hard to do. You can see someone else's faults and flaws, but then when you have to look inward, you're like, oh, wow. And it's really hard to, if you're honest, it's really hard to look at yourself and say, okay, yes, I do this not well, or I do this horribly. How do you get a person to that point? Because, before I can sit down and realize I have a trigger, I got to sit down and say, okay, here's the things that I do well, I don't do well, or these are the things that people have told me I do, and I have to accept that.
So I think what can be helpful here, and again, it depends where you are in your journey of self-development. And, hey, I have encountered pretty senior leaders whose level of self-awareness is incredibly low, and you have to treat it with kid gloves because there's a lot of prestige there and a feeling of a lot to lose. So you really have to understand where they're at in their journey. So I think, first of all, I think you can turn to some assessments. So, there's some behavioral assessments. I use a couple of emotional intelligence assessments. There's the DISC profile. So there's lots of profiles out there that are positive in nature, that are really exploratory about who you are and your behaviors. And I think that can be helpful for some leaders to begin to kind of open the door. I don't believe there's one assessment that is the best out there. I think really in the hands of a good coach, what it does is it enables a conversation to happen. And then that rich conversation can help that exploration. The 360 tool, that is where you not only evaluate yourself, but others evaluate it. That takes it up to another level. And I think for leaders, that can be very eye-opening as well. And two ways, very often we go to the negative. It's like, they're going to tell me what I'm doing wrong. But I often say as well, maybe they're telling you you're doing something right. That you're not even realizing as well, or you're having an impact in a certain area. So I think 360s as well can begin that process. And I think what you're looking for is you're also helping a leader begin to build a mechanism around their lives, which is more curious and more reflective. And, business world today is a crazy world. It is full of change. It is rapid. It is incessant. And so it mitigates against being reflective and being curious, etc. So you're really trying to build in this mindset as well, which can be helpful.
Okay. So let's get to the next thing that you're expert in, and that is the facial recognition and emotions. Tell me about that, because I don't do well with that.
Yeah, so it's interesting, when it came to, the emotional intelligence and affect research, search on emotions is actually pretty recent. Up into the 1960s, there really wasn't a lot of research done because that's not where psychology was. And so some of that initial research and the continuing research have found that, that there are emotional displays in our face that can be recognized and understood, and that there are actually universal expressions. We used to think that all emotions were just culturally based, and so it varied depending on the person and where they were. But we understand that there actually are 7 universal emotions, which are shown in the face, and no matter where you are in the world, no matter the gender of the person or age, they will show up in the same way. Mm-hmm. And even if a person tries to suppress them, they will leak out, because they are too quick for our consciousness to kind of grab them. By the time we become conscious that we want to grab them, they leak out. And so those 7 emotions are surprise, they are fear, they are happiness, sadness, disgust, contempt, and anger. Mm. Yeah. And so they will be displayed in the same way. So you can, some of the work that I do is helping people understand the way that they're configured in the face and how to recognize them. And then also to recognize, even when a person doesn't want to show the emotion, when it leaks out, how to read that as well.
Mm. So do you train on how to control that?
Well, see, now that is something you can't do, because one of the things about the timeline of an emotion is, before we become conscious of an emotion, what's happened is that within the first half second, we've been physically triggered, and we have physiological reactions in our body, including the facial. And so just say I'm in conversation with you and say that I'm angry at you, and I want you to know that I'm angry. Then you will see anger in my face. But just say I'm angry with you, I don't want you to know I'm angry. Then by the time, I have to hide this. And by the time I've hit it, it's leaked out. And if you're trained enough, you can read that. Now, the training is not to go, hey, I saw you you're angry. What's all that? But it's really just go, that's interesting. Oh, so they're angry. Now, one thing I'll never know is I don't know why you're angry. I can guess at that, but I know that you are feeling anger. Mm-hmm. And so then that just informs the conversation. So, training leaders to do that is very powerful, because just in situations, you're at a meeting, you say, hey, I need this proposal next week. And say the person then flashes a sign of fear at you. It's like, oh, interesting. What's that about? Mm-hmm. Are they fearful they won't get it done? Are they fearful that the time is too pressing? What is it? And so it just lets you ask another question that gives in some more data. So that's really the power of it.
And it's funny, because I was going to ask that. So if you do in that scenario see that, do you ask that person later on, like, are you okay? Is this something that's doable for you? Or do you just leave it alone and say, well, I'm going to keep track of, this is how Sally acted? How do you handle that?
I like to, I think the way you described it is beautiful. So I do. I think like a little side conversation and just saying, hey, I just would just want to make sure that the request that I made is okay. Everything okay with that? And just say, as you say, what Sally says, Mm-hmm. But just to keep it, but I think that's perfect, because you're not calling a person out, and you're just adding some extra support and clarification. And maybe the emotion wasn't around that, but at least, you're using that data to really sense. And it's amazing, because then people get the feeling, wow, they're really understanding me. Well, why did they ask that question? And people really feel the empathy, and they feel the connection.
So let's say that it wasn't something specifically that you said. Let's say Sally comes in and you can see her face. And this is where a lot of leaders don't do well. Sally may have had something going on at home. Mm-hmm. Would you recommend that you pull her aside and say, hey, is everything okay? Or do you just say, oh, she's having a bad day? Because I think, like you said, the empathy and showing people that you care, I think that goes a long way. And you don't have to get into all the details of someone's personal life, but I think just showing them that you care by asking and saying, hey, you don't seem like you're too happy today. Is everything okay? Is that something that leaders should do?
I think so. I think so. Now, obviously, somebody, well, I don't have time, et cetera, et cetera. Right. I always say, I'm not asking for you to initiate a 30-minute deep conversation with a person, but just to say, I may be wrong, but I'm just noticing today, is everything okay today? And that can be, so empowering for people. that a person's really listening. The other thing as well, I always say about listening, people, well, I don't have time to listen. I said, if you give a person your 100% attention,
Yep.
I say that it's like stretching time, and that 5 minutes can seem like half an hour,
right?
Because one of the things that we don't get from people in general, both in work and in life, is people that truly listen to us. We're horrible. People think they listen well, but they really are truly horrible at listening. And so when we really engage in a person, we listen to them, it's amazing how even a brief space of time can really impact another person.
Mm. So I've mentioned this a couple of times on the show, and I'm going to give you a scenario that actually happened to me. And from your expertise and perspective, I want you to tell me what you think. So I had a second level manager years ago and this person ended up being someone that I really didn't trust, didn't care for, but would see me and say, "Hi, Trina, how are your two boys?" And just kind of like do it in passing. Well, I don't have two boys. And I told this person this several times, but every time I saw them, they would repeatedly ask the same question. So finally I got to the point where I was like, you know what? They don't even care. It's not even worth correcting them, because my thing is, you're the second level supervisor. If you really cared, you would have listened to what I said when I told you I don't have two boys. But instead you asked me, like I said, it's kind of like the, "Hi, how you doing?" And you keep walking. You really don't want to know, right? So you just keep walking. So what would you assess about that, leader?
Well, basically, you've got a person on the face of it, first of all, who's not listening, because part of what a good manager or leader will do is that they will listen. They will pay attention to conversations. And, so often where great leadership is built is not in what we say, but it's in how we listen. Are we picking things up, little things around that? You can pick up little tidbits of people's life. And when you are able to insert that somewhere, the person then is like, wow, where did they were really listening. So it seems on the face of it, you've got someone who isn't listening, and worse, you've got someone who then adds injury to insult and basically doesn't even, if not only were they initially listening, but then they repeat it time and time again. And so, I'm not sure their motive, but what's very clear from this is the way it made you feel. And how did it make you feel? It disengaged you.
Right.
And so basically you just said, this person's ingenuine. They're really not, they don't really care. And they're showing they don't care about what they said. And so therefore what happens is I disengage, and that's the core of the problem.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I'm telling you, people need to call you in all the time because like you said,
it goes back to I think my favorite quote ever from, the great Maya Angelou. People will forget what you do. People forget what you say, but they will not forget how you make them feel. And really, this is where this power of emotional connection comes in. This sense of this feeling that this person cares.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so important, even in the work environment, even, like you said, you don't have to ask someone the 30-minute, dialogue of their life, but just those little things. And I remember a lady that I interviewed on the podcast. She said one of the things she does is every morning she greets all of her employees. She owns her own company. And she's like, it's just, a couple of minutes. She'll say, "Hey, Bob, how was your son's baseball game? Oh, okay. How's your wife doing? Is she still ill?" Things like that. She said, and by the time she gets in early and by the time most of her staff comes in, she knows she stops accepting calls and she'll just stand around by the door and do that as people come in. And I thought that is such a brilliant idea because you are showing people that you care. And it's not that, you're trying to get every detail, but if I discussed with you yesterday and I said, "Irvine, you know what? My son's got a football game." And then tomorrow you're saying, "Oh, hey, how was your son's football game?" I'm like, wow, that means a lot.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And I would even go further because what's brilliant about that example is as well, some leaders will say, "Well, I just don't have time to do that."
Right.
Well, here's what I bet you that person, if you brought her back and you talked to her about that, she also picks up if someone's coming in and something's not right. Mm-hmm. She'll be able to 10 a mile away, and she can preempt something that would have bigger consequence down the day. So just say you have a person who comes in, just say they're angry, they're down or whatever, and they're not performing well, and it creates a problem. If you're there at the beginning to say, this could potentially be an issue, you can kind of then insert some greater support, some conversation, etc. And this is where the emotional intelligence comes in, that you're actually able then to prevent, say, a situation that could be problematic down the road.
Man, like I said, I hope everyone listening, especially leaders and people who appoint leaders, I hope you are listening to this, because it's so important, and it really affects the morale of the people who are working for you. And I think the more that people and leaders understand that, you'll have a better working environment. But these are not only skills that can be used in the workplace. You can use these in your personal life with your mate and with your children. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Because emotional intelligence doesn't differentiate between work and home. And, that's another thing as well that I find that good leaders are able to do, and people, is, so often the transition we make from work to home and home to work is very important every day. And I think, especially now, even when it can be in the same house, that you're literally going to the dining room table and switching on the computer for your Zoom, but we carry baggage with us, and it impacts us, and very often to be able to realize that I'm carrying with me something that happened in the last minute or the last meeting that I was in, and I need some time to get out of that before I engage with my family or my friends, because I'm carrying that with me. And I think that's an essential part of emotional intelligence too.
Absolutely. All right, Irvine, I can talk to you forever about this, because like I said, this is kind of my jam. I love what you're doing, but we're going to get into our questions.
Okay.
So number one, who or what motivates you?
What motivates me is that the smile in a client's face when they have an aha moment and they've discovered something that's making their life easier.
Okay. What demotivates you?
Rudeness. Rudeness is a trigger for me. When people don't show people just common respect, it's very demotivating for me.
Mm-hmm. When was a time that something was said or done to hurt you, but it worked for your good?
Interesting question. I would have to say that I was when I started my business, there was a few people that were naysayers that I gave up a position as CEO of a company. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Are you crazy? You got the security, you got this, that, and the other." And I didn't listen to them. And I did everything you shouldn't. I moved to a new city and not knowing anyone. And they said, "That's crazy." And it kind of was fuel. Like, I'm going to show them.
I'm like that too. What is your fear?
Security. I grew up, in a very violent society, and I am risk averse at times, and my fear is that that's a fear of me of being caught, and so yeah, it's a continuing journey in my life.
Is there a time when you wish you had done something that you didn't?
Yes, I am. So one of my traits is that I'm conflict averse, and at times I have run away from conflict, and I've come to realize that. And there's one or two situations I look back on when I should have had difficult conversations with people and I didn't, because I was fearful that it might impact the relationship. And as I look back, I think my relationship would be in a different space if I had the courage to have those conversations.
Is there a time that you wish you had not done something?
Yeah, I have again, and the other way in the heat of the moment, I've said some things that hurt people, and and there are things that you can't talk back, and there's a few times in my younger life when I said things that I just really regretted it.
Mm. What is your definition of success?
My definition of success would be when you are doing things that align with your deepest values. Mm. And if you are there in life, then there is meaning. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to have meaning in our life.
Mm. How do you recharge?
I recharge through reading and cooking and travel. So it has been a difficult 18 months. I love going to places where I am out of I'm out of sorts in the sense of that I'm it's a culture that's different, and it gets my curiosity going, and I love it.
I'm shaking my head because I'm the same way. I love traveling internationally. So yeah, I've had 2 trips planned in these last 2 years, and they both got canceled. So I'm not happy about it. What are you awesome at?
I think I have a gift in connecting with people, and people feel that I create a space where they're heard and they're appreciated and celebrated.
What legacy do you want to leave?
I want people to say that here goes a person who built bridges and not walls. Mm-hmm.
Give the listeners one motivational takeaway.
That we have lived in 18 months where we have been afraid of an invisible virus. And yet each and every day we get to sow our emotions and we catch the emotions of others. And it's a power and a choice that we have. And so be deliberate in sowing positivity, being deliberate in sowing compassion and love, and be deliberate in listening to others, because it truly can have an impact beyond your imagination.
Mm. So, Irvine, tell the listeners how they can work with you. I believe you have a book out, how they can get all of that. And give us, actually, because I didn't touch on it, tell us a little bit about your book and as well as how we can get it.
So the book is called Leadership Lessons from the Pub. I grew up in a pub in Northern Ireland where my family, we lived above it. And we were very impacted by it. We actually lost our business in a terrorist bombing when I was 6. And so the book goes into that. It goes into the resilience, and it talks about what happens in this space, this pub, that creates relationships that leaders can really learn from. So that's what the book is. And if you want to contact me, the best is my website, irvinenugent.com. Book information is there. I also have a YouTube channel, and every Wednesday I have an episode which looks at emotional intelligence at work and at home. So you might want to subscribe there. And then I also have a little course on emotional intelligence for people that want to grow a little bit more. It's totally free. And you can find it at irvinenugent.com/gift. And you can access that course, and there are lots of cool tools and tips there for growing your emotional intelligence.
And what's the name of your YouTube channel?
Irvine Nugent, just through my name. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, Irvine, I thank you for being on Trina Talk. This has been, I love the conversation. Like I said, you and I can talk forever about this, because this is kind of like my thing. But I thank you, and I hope that we stay in contact, and never know what the future may hold for us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to not only have our conversation, but also connect with your listeners too.
If you like Trina Talk podcast, please don't forget to go out to iTunes and rate it 5 stars and leave a review. Also, who else in your life do you know that needs some motivation and inspiration in their lives? Don't forget to share Trina Talk with them. I hope you have a great week. And remember, if you change your mindset, you can change your life. Keep striving, because success is a journey, not a destination.